Good evening and welcome to the program at the end of a very somber week. And I tell you what, in all the years of doing this program, this would have to be the grimmest U.S. report I've ever presented. It's now a little over 36 hours since the news broke that Charlie Kirk, and he needs no introduction, was taken out by a single shot from a sniper's bullet in Utah. His crime? His provocation? Well, we don't know for sure, but it is a fair bet that the only thing he did wrong, the only thing that attracted that assassin's bullet, was to be a conservative, an outspoken conservative who had an incredible talent for bringing young people over to his side of politics through his famous Change My Mind debate series, where he would sit at a table and literally take all comers and use reason and Socratic dialogue to argue his case and win converts. Kirk was incredibly passionate about America and young people and getting young people to believe in a brighter future when they were born into a system that seemed, and indeed seems, to be failing them. He built the massive Turning Point USA network, and he got results. He managed to help massive numbers of young Americans, particularly young men, move away from the left and the leftist indoctrination they'd received every day of their lives through the schools and popular culture. And of course, he was close to President Trump and the MAGA movement. They killed him, but his legacy will be the most conservative generation in generations. What happened this week is not just a terrible tragedy for Kirk, his widow, and his two young children left without a father. It is also a tragedy for America because it represents an incredibly dangerous escalation of leftist violence. Or rather, I should say, an escalation of the leftist celebration of violence. Because while it is true that over the years, Democrats as well as Republicans have lost their lives to political violence in America, and all of that is bad, all of that is evil, all of that needs to stop, only one side seems to celebrate it.
Do you support his death?
I do.
You support his death?
Charlie Kirk.
You support Charlie Kirk being killed?
Yes, I do.
On the day he died, you're here at a vigil for Charlie Kirk and you support his death.
Do you support a Nazi?
No, I don't support a Nazi. Charlie Kirk wasn't a Nazi.
Live by the sword, die by the sword. He did say that gun deaths were an acceptable side effect of gun rights.
And unfortunately, that means your wife is going to be raising her kids potentially alone.
But at least everyone still gets access to all their guns.
I love that last one in particular. You see the logic here? Kirk was a supporter of the Second Amendment right to bear arms, and for that, the left thinks he deserves to have been shot. Now, that's some great, but I think very telling logic there. Because what are they saying? Take away our guns, otherwise we'll be forced to shoot you. Seriously. It's right up there with Islam is a religion of peace and death to anyone who says otherwise. A visibly rattled Trump, himself the victim of 2 assassination attempts, addressed the hate on the left shortly after the killing.
It's a long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now.
Look, he's right, but if I may disagree a little bit here with the president, I don't want to buy in too much to the mean words cause violence argument, because I think there is something deeper going on. This is more than words. Now, the left, if you know your history, and I know you do, has a real nihilistic darkness at its heart, at the heart of its soul, despite all of its peace, love, and mung beans rhetoric. Kirk represented everything the left hates: happiness, family, Christianity. Look at him here and look at what he left behind. And now he's dead. Here's his coffin being carried by Vice President J.D. Vance after landing in his home state of Arizona. There's no words for that. And unlike conservatives who want to preserve and to build, those on the left, the revolutionary left, they want to tear down and start anew to build their own utopia. It has been the same ever since the terror of the French Revolution, right through the communist upheavals of the 20th century, right through to today. And death, all too often, is part of that program. Because if you're in the way of the road to utopia, you will be crushed. Now, the great question now, in this moment of grief and sadness and anger, is what to do next. And already there are reports that the bullets the killer fired or planned to fire were engraved with expressions of transgender and so-called anti-fascist ideology. And we now know, we all know, what so-called anti-fascist or Antifa ideology is all about. Riots, threats, destruction in the name of politics. And I think this opens a new possibility here. Now, whether or not the killer is part of a broader network of organized activists remains to be seen. But either way, this should be the final spur required to force the FBI, now run by Kash Patel, to do something that should have been done years ago. That is, smash Antifa, the so-called anti-fascist militant organization that happens to run around like a bunch of fascists, smashing and rioting and everything else, and all the other militant organizing groups that have been driving violent protests in America since at least the 2020 Summer of Love. And this is a great precedent. There is a great precedent for this. In the 1960s, under President Lyndon Johnson, a president who, let's be honest, had a lot of flaws to say the least, did something good. He ordered this man, the head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, another deeply flawed individual, but that's another story, to take down the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. Now, back then, they used the Civil Rights Act to smash the organization that had been responsible for horrendous murders and bombings in the South, killing both black Americans and white civil rights workers. Today, there's another option. Use anti-racketeering statutes known as RICO to go after Antifa and other such groups. Again, whether or not Kirk's killer turns out to have been part of a more organized group, there is already early evidence suggesting he was influenced by what is broadly, if entirely inaccurately, referred to as the anti-fascist movement, which has been responsible for so much mayhem in the U.S., including riots and partial occupations of cities like Seattle. Smashing Antifa would go a long way to disrupt violent radical left protest movements that were previously, tacitly or otherwise, encouraged by the left, including the Biden and Obama administrations, to act as shock troops for their own agendas. It would be a small start, but an important one, and in a time of tragedy, feeling powerless is the worst thing. This idea, though, gives a broader agenda for the administration that might also be a good way to signal to the rest of America that they've got their back and that the bad guys aren't going to win.